I'm Dr. Erica Bove, and welcome to the Love and Science podcast. I'm your host and also the founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. I'm so excited you're here today. With over a decade of experience helping thousands of women just like you, I empower professional women to build their families with confidence and compassion. Let's dive in. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. I am so excited to have one of my favorite humans on as a guest today. Her name is Dr. Michelle Quirk, and she is a board-certified pediatrician who is also a certified run coach. We talk all the time about how the fertility journey is one big marathon, and this is actually a marathon coach coming to talk to us about how there are some parallels between her work in marathon coaching and what we can glean being fertility patients on this massive fertility journey, which for most of my listeners is beyond weeks. It's, usually into the years at this point. So welcome, Dr. Michelle. It's so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. And, before we move on, I just wanted to read a little bit more of your bio. So basically your company, aside from your already busy clinical practice, which we're all doing this work, right? We know what it's like, is called Mindful Marathon, which I think is such a beautiful name for what you do. And your mission is to help busy professionals make running easy and fun so they can achieve their fitness goals, improve their health, and embrace mindfulness. You coach athletes, you lead a mindful movement retreat, and you are also the host of the Mindful Marathon podcast. Is there anything I left out in that?
I don't think so. I think I love run Disney races and Bruce Springsteen. That's about it.
Oh, that's super fun. I know. Whenever people say like, what's a fun fact about you? I usually say I sing on my treadmill and people are like, really? And I'm like, you can ask my friends. It's actually true. That's
Yes.
amazing. And you're in the Philadelphia area, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I
I
always
live
like
in
to
the
just say
suburbs of Philly.
geographically where are people? Okay. So, the fertility journey. So like, if we think about it, somebody's already tried for like 6 months to a year, at least usually when they see a fertility doctor, and then they go and see a fertility doctor. And then it's like, okay, we're going to do some tests. And then people do tests. And then, which are some of them are fairly invasive, like fallopian tube tests and uterine cavity tests and sperm tests, even though that's not invasive, it's super awkward. Most of the men don't like to do it if there is a man in the equation. And then there's the waiting for the test results. So then, and this is like very early on the journey, then you get your test results and hopefully you get a diagnosis like PCOS, endometriosis, diminished ovarian reserve, male factor. And a third of patients actually get like no diagnosis. Not really no diagnosis, but it's like unexplained. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
there's an explanation. We just don't know what it is. And so that then becomes the springboard for like, okay, then these are your treatment options. The hard part is like, we are so inefficient as humans, even without, having infertility diagnosis. Even young, healthy, fertile people get pregnant at like 20% per month at best. And then, people who have infertility, it gets harder. So oftentimes these fertility treatments don't work in the first month, in the first iteration chapter. Sometimes people then move on to more involved therapies. I'd say most of my clients are kind of in the IVF stages of things. And sometimes it even takes multiple IVF cycles for things to work. And an IVF cycle is, as you know, like 2 weeks, but then you wait for the data about the eggs and the fertilization and the embryo growth, and sometimes even genetic data. So it's like this like massive, like hurry up and wait years of your life process. And that takes endurance, right? That takes a lot of endurance. So can you tell me sort of like from that, like sort of overview, what are your thoughts about the similarities between training for and running a marathon and the fertility journey?
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking, I just kept thinking like, wow, this is a lot of time. And I think that's right. A lot of it has to do with how you approach it with your mindset. So running a marathon, really, very rewarding experience, but quite a challenge. And I would say just, to hear you talk about the math of it and like how long the fertility journey may take, training for a marathon at the very least is going to be about half a year. I mean, a training cycle is 5 or 6 months, and that's assuming that you have a base built already. So some people train for years to get to the point where they want to run their first marathon. And so I think it's important to remember your why. That might be the first pointer, like why you set out on this journey in the first place, and keep that close to your heart and close at hand. What I usually have my athletes do is write that down somewhere. A journal, an index card that you put on the mirror that you can see every day. But remember what it is that you're shooting for, because on the day to day, so many things are going to come up, right? And you have, like you said, you have this hurry up and wait. And I think that's the same in marathon training. Like we're doing, all of these runs for specific purposes, but it is a lot of hurry up and wait. Like we're hurrying up while we're running, and then we're waiting for our body to adapt to these changes. And so, remembering your why is probably the first thing I would say. Um,
Yeah, full disclosure, I went to your webinar the other night because I'm training for a half marathon right now. So all of these concepts are very fresh in my mind in terms of, and I know a half is not the same as a full, but I think a lot of the concepts apply. And when you said that the other night about think about your deepest why, I thought I have that conversation with every single person who enters my universe thinking about working together. We say, what is your deepest why? Because when the times get tough, that becomes the motivation, and everyone's deepest why is different, and that might even change over time too. Like maybe the deepest why for one chapter or one marathon is going to be different than another, right? Like things
mhm,
can change. But for my clients, like sometimes it's like because I have so much love to give, and I want nothing more than to be a parent, right? Like I hear that.
mhm,
Or sometimes people look at their spouse and they say like they just are like the most incredible human, and they really want to have children, and I really want to have that experience with them. So it's like this sort of communal thing. I've even heard people say like I had a miscarriage and I'm so devastated from that miscarriage that I need to be whole again. And I believe that going through this process and having a child is going to make me whole. So everyone's deepest why is different. I think about my own marathon training journey. Like I used to be a competitive runner, so there's all of that. And it used to be like to be super fast and motivated and accomplish things, improve myself. Now I just run half marathons to keep in touch with my friends and to keep me honest with my workouts. Those are very different goals. I would say at this point in my life, much more satisfying, but that then influences all my choices. Like, am I gonna go crazy with the speed workouts? Am I gonna like all those things matter. And so I think you're right. Like we do identify the deepest why in the beginning, but writing it down in a visible place, even like notes on our phones. We are always with our phones, and we can open up, pin it to the top. Google Keep is my favorite app. So you can just pin it to the top and then read it. I think that can be really helpful to just start with that perspective, because then that becomes the springboard for all the decisions.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it helps to figure out, if you haven't considered it before, like what is it that is motivating you? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes people really need to sit with that before they may have an answer. And like you said, over time, right, what motivates you and what your why is, it may change and probably will change, depending on what stage of life you're in. But
Yeah.
one of the other things I was going to share with your listeners. Perhaps like thinking about, like I think in training cycles or training blocks, but break the bigger goal into smaller parts along the way. And so,
Yes.
we're both a part of this wonderful business group with Dr. Una, and she always has us celebrate our wins. And that is something I have taken with me in all of my coaching calls with my athletes and in our training discussions, but really from the day to day and week to week to celebrate the small wins along the way, even if it seems like, oh, that wasn't a big thing or that was something insignificant. Really, the small wins add up over time, and eventually when you see it, when you look over the last 6 months or the last year, you see how far you came in your thinking. And so breaking a bigger goal into smaller parts is
Yeah.
sometimes helpful.
And we talk about that all the time, especially if somebody is like in an IVF cycle. I'm like, hey, your goal is just to get through your egg retrieval. That's like all you got to do is focus on Monday. And then once you're through that, then your goal is to focus on getting through Tuesday, which is when you're going to hear about the embryo, fertilization. Then your goal is the blastocyst report. So like that sort of, and I tell them, I'm like, I'm a runner. I'm like literally looking to the next mile marker. Like that's as far as we're going to see. And I think it just becomes a lot more manageable because otherwise the algorithms are just too overwhelming. But breaking it up into the small parts. And I also heard you say something that I think my audience will find valuable, is that you recommend keeping a journal of not just like writing down the deepest why, but also of the wins. And I love that idea because I think it's one thing, we always start our support groups on Friday nights with like, what's your win of the week? It does not have to be fertility specific. It can be like, I set a boundary at work, or I, like said no to my mother-in-law when she filled my food full of fridge, or I mean, seriously, and I know it sounds funny, but like these are the things that, like, this with your athletes, like when you coach and you like really look at mindset and like, why do I do the things I do? How do I want to be? It up levels every other aspect of life, right? So
Mm.
so it doesn't have to be fertility specific, but people have wins. Like one of the wins this week was that somebody had bad news and everybody rallied around that person, and like cookies were sent across the country, and like I just was like, this is so beautiful to me.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes it's very subtle, and unless we document those things, our monkey mind, our brain, is going to try to get the better of us. So like, sometimes for me, like, we have these watershed moments where you're like, oh, I handled that situation a lot better than I would have 6 months ago. Guess what? We frame it as a win. We call it a win. We write it down, right? So then we can look at the progress over time. Maybe we see themes. Maybe we, have a same win over and over again, because that really is something that is part of our growth edge and what we're here to learn. Like, but that next step, it does not take that much time or effort. It can even be on a notes app on the phone, but like really documenting the win. And we even do this, like, for my people who are in my program, like, it would be super easy on a Friday night, just like open up the app, open up the journal to be like, my win is this, and then it would be done. But I think we really do have to celebrate the progress, because otherwise, the negative news, the negative thought patterns, they persist and they can destroy us if we don't have more things to counter them. Right.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
definitely true. And I think in my in our training journals with my athletes, people tend to report the negative things after a run. So we use an app called Final Surge, and people, right, we can talk back and forth in there. But usually people are telling me like, oh, that effort level didn't feel good, or my shins hurt, or my, fueling was not on point. And we tend to, the mind goes to what was not good about the run. But when we start changing that and saying, okay, what went well about this? Or like, well, I hit my paces, or, I ran in the heat, but I felt really good, or whatever it is. But our mind starts to pick those wins out instead of always focusing on perhaps what didn't go perfectly, because it never does. It never,
Yeah. It
we're
never
always a
goes
work in
perfectly.
progress.
When I meet somebody for the first time in my doctor role, I say, hey, like, I need to get to know you and your values and your goals and what you do for fun and all that stuff. And this is going to be a journey together. There's going to be some good news. There's going to be some bad news. We're going to navigate it all together. So like, let's get ready to do it. You're right. Like, it's never going to be a perfect journey. And so, but the cool thing, it's kind of like the gratitude practice. It's rewiring the brain. Like, once we start noticing the things that are actually going well, our brains, then it's almost like we scan and we filter, and we're more likely to notice more good things. So I think it's like a beautiful practice of rewiring our brains. I always say, if our brains are going to work against us, why don't we make them work for us? And this is part of that process.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the other things, we kind of alluded to it, but I'll give it as maybe a third point,
Sure.
to focus on, so to bring in a little bit of mindfulness practice to all of this. I use both like visualization and mantras with my athletes, and I think those could be helpful for those of us on the fertility journey as well, because these kind of like a mantra is just a short phrase or a sentence that helps to kind of refocus your mind. And so if you're in this moment of feeling overwhelmed and there's lots of different variables, and your mind is going further and further down the road and kind of spiraling a little bit, you can center yourself and say, okay, like, I love that. Run the mile you're in, run the race, run your own race. Just have a short phrase that kind of centers yourself, like, okay, I'm going to focus on the next mile marker. I'm going to focus on what we're doing today, what we're doing this
Yeah.
hour, this moment, and then kind of open it back up, because otherwise we really try to skip ahead. 20 steps down the road, and who knows where we'll be 20 steps from now.
That's so on point. And we do mantras in my program as well. And so this is really fabulous. How do you help your athletes choose their mantras? Because that's like a question I get all the time is like, how do I know what mantra is for me and what's going to actually work?
I try to have them think about what they already think about on a run. So, of course, I have like a couple that I can suggest if someone is stuck, and say, just try these out and see if you like them, and you can borrow them. But I try to get people to think about what's going on in their mind when they're already running. So, a lot of people don't know, or they tell me like, well, I run to try to like tune out what I'm thinking about. And so I usually have people try to, like, if you already run with headphones and music, maybe try running without them once or twice and just see like what you're noticing and what thoughts are in your head. And focus on the good ones, right? Because a lot of us have a negative narrative of, again, like, I'm not hitting these paces, or like, what is this workout that Coach Michelle gave me? And I am very mad at her. And so I try to have people think like, okay, like, focus on your breathing, focus on your heart rate, focus on nature when you're out there, and see what words or phrases may come up for you. And as soon as you get back home from your run or off your treadmill, write those down in your journal, and then we can come up with a mantra based on those things.
It's so interesting because I think what I'm hearing you say is you need to create space for the mantras to emerge, really. And if we're always, listening to a podcast or, a book on audiobook, I say book on tape because I'm older.
No, I get
Used to
that.
have book on tape, an audiobook, or if we're just constantly listening to the news like that, it is helpful in one sense because it kind of does keep the focus, but it really does prevent us from understanding the deeper layers. And so the first step is creating space to say, okay, what emerges? And then of what emerges, then what can I choose to direct myself in the direction that I want to go? Right.
Yeah.
Um, we do this, in our practice too. We actually out of bad news is where I kind of do, because I think that's one of the hardest things that my people experience is like a negative pregnancy test, or, this test result, your journey just got a little bit longer, like whatever that is. And so I
Mhm.
ask my people, I say, like, what do you need to hear? Like, what in that self-compassion, we've talked about
Yes.
self-compassion, we share that too. Like, what do you really need to, what do you need to know? What do you need to hear? And a lot of times what emerges is like, I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're doing our best, then like what else is there, and that's nice and short and sweet. It kind of refocuses. um Other
Yeah.
times for my people, it's like I trust the process. And so maybe like this particular cycle, like, we put so much pressure on this cycle has to be the one that gets the pregnancy test or the embryos or whatever it is. But like for many that, this is a journey, right? Mile 8 is not the same as mile 16, and like eventually this is going to work. Like, so I'm going to hope for the best in this cycle, release the outcome.
Hmm.
And I trust that eventually this is going to be successful. I got my A team, I got my REI, I got my coach, I got all the things. I'm like, this is going to work eventually. I just need to trust the process, trust that I'm resourceful. I love that one. I'm resourceful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because
Trust the
sometimes,
process. Love it.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Um,
And trust the
yeah, it's
training. That's what we always say. Trust the
trust
training,
your
right?
training, which is so funny because it works for medicine. Like that's what I tell my fellows when they're like nervous about being new attending soon. And I'm like, trust your training, you've got this. And it works for the marathon training too, because if you've put in the work and the effort, and I would say by analogy, it also works for the emotional tools. Like if you've been doing the work of like feeling the feelings, which is a discipline of processing the emotions, of figuring out what your values are and how you make values-based decisions, that sort of emotional rigor, that emotional training, if you can trust that, then that whatever news you're going to get, you're going to have the tools to be able to navigate that with grace and ease. Like when you have a coach, right? Your athletes have you as a resource as your coach to troubleshoot stuff. My people have me that they can. So trust your training, trust your team. Then
Mhm.
not that we never absolve ourselves of the personal responsibility, but I think most of us in medicine take on too much responsibility, right? And then we blame
No.
ourselves. So, we blame ourselves solely when things don't go well. And so we really need to share this, right? And then it's a shared experience. So the challenges are shared, and then the victories are shared too.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want, I'll share one more mantra that came up on our workshop. But a friend of mine, Jen, I've stolen this one from her, but she has one that is strong legs, strong mind, strong heart. So think about that
I
one, but you can
love that
adapt
one.
that, adapt it for
Uterus,
you.
we'd have to add uterus in there
There
somewhere.
you go. Yeah, instead of legs, maybe.
I have a beautiful, beautiful receptive uterus. Yes. Something like that. Yeah. And that also reminds me, like, strong back, open heart is one that
Mhm.
I really love to think about, emotional, like, openness and readiness, because it's so easy to close ourselves off to the pain. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, there's possibly a negative pregnancy test. This one might work and might not work. Excuse me. I've had so much bad news. But if we can keep that strong back, open heart, which is the same thing as like strong legs, strong, say it again,
Strong legs, strong mind, strong heart.
strong legs, which is the body,
Hmm.
strong mind,
Mind.
strong
Yep.
heart. And that's so beautiful. I love that so much. These mantras, I mean, mine when I'm running, and I don't know where this came from because it was even before Glennon Doyle, but like, we can do hard things. And for some
Mhm.
reason, like,
Yeah.
that works with the pace of it. And I mean, the fertility journey is definitely a hard thing.
Mhm.
So, and it's
Yes.
notice it's not I can do hard things, it's we can do hard things, because I think about, like, this is a collective experience. We turn it from being the solitary, painful thing to being one that is actually in community, which I think is so powerful.
Yeah.
um
I also love pace of grace.
Pace of grace, that's right. And so one thing that there's so much I want to ask you about. So we had talked a little bit about, like, those times, like, when the progress feels slower. And so
Mhm.
for my people, my patients and my clients, like, maybe they have a endometrial biopsy that shows that they have inflammation and they need to get that cleared before they move forward. Maybe somebody finds out that all their embryos are aneuploid and that they have to go back to the drawing board and make new embryos. Like, maybe somebody's period doesn't come. They've already canceled their whole schedule for the next 2 weeks for, retrieval. And because their period doesn't come, they're delayed by 2 weeks. And then, they have to, like, scramble to fill their clinic and then request more time off. Like, there's so many places in this process where the journey becomes a little bit longer, the progress feels slow. What do you tell your athletes in those situations when it's like, I'm putting in the work, I'm not seeing the results, like, I'm starting to be not just physically fatigued, but like emotionally fatigued?
Yeah, yeah, and I think a big feeling is usually just like yeah, feeling discouraged. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is you're putting in all this time and effort and you're not seeing the fruits of your labor. And I think going back to just trusting the process, knowing that um, I want to say this comes up a lot with my runners with injuries because they're never planned and never really wanted. And, they take you out of the thing that you love doing and the thing that you have been working so hard toward. And so I think the runners out there would really understand this with the injuries perspective. But I think it's important to remember that it's just a small piece in the puzzle. Like it's a small period of time even though in the moment it does not feel like that, and you feel like you're being derailed for weeks, months, years, who knows if you need a surgery, for example, you may have had a goal, a marathon goal or a speed goal or whatever the goal is that you've signed up for the race, you have a whole trip planned around like a one comes to mind is really like a world major marathon that
Yeah.
they're hard to get into, or maybe you're raising money for a charity, like, and then all of a sudden you get this injury and then everything gets derailed and you have to figure out new plans. But I think worse than not being able to run the race is just feeling discouraged about the whole process and not being able to do the thing you love to do. So I think trying to reframe and say like, okay, this is a bump in the road. This is a hill, a mountain that we're at right now. But after every challenge comes some smoother water ahead. So I think, looking back on your journey, that whether it's running or it's fertility, that there are many bumps in the road, but usually there are periods of time after that where things settle out. So just
Mm-hmm.
trying to reframe, and even though it feels like this huge mountain in the moment, know that this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways that you can kind of keep keep the vision alive for the future, without totally, just forgetting everything, right? Like I have a lot of people who say, well, why did I do this in the first place? Like, why did I put in all this time and effort in the first place? So that's a time to really pull out remember your why card and figure out the motivations, and
Yeah.
lean on your team, lean on your family, your support system, lean on the things that have kept you going so far, and just know that this is just a small bump in the road. Like in the scheme of life, we have we have time, but it's really hard in the moment as a person
Yeah,
who's
it
been
is
there.
so hard in the moment. It really is. And
Yes.
I love that. Like this too shall pass. Like everything in life, like I said, say to my new patients, like there's gonna be good news along the way, there's gonna be bad news along the way. There's like a whole mix. And so like whether, if somebody does experience like a setback or, something, they lose their insurance or like whatever it is, like this is a time for radical self-care. Like what do you need to get through this process? I have a lot of surgeons in my group. If your patient were having surgery, what would you tell them they needed to do to get back to baseline? Radical self-care, more sleep, good nutrition, all those things, because this is a healing journey, right? We need
Hmm.
to heal before we can truly move forward to the next chapter.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're probably gonna have another injury. Like it's like we gotta make sure that we're really being like totally mindful of the fact that we need to heal.
Hmm.
And sometimes even other aspects of life open up that we didn't even anticipate too.
You were
When
reading my mind there, but yeah.
Yeah, tell me, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say that the first time I had an injury it had nothing to do with running. I like twisted my ankle gardening. Just a ridiculous thing, but it took me out
Uh,
for quite a while. But while I was not allowed to run because I was wearing this lovely boot, I found my way into swimming, and I was
mm,
never a swimmer, and I never, I mean, I knew how to swim, but I did not do any form of organized swimming. But I found my way into swimming, and I had been kind of on and off with it over the years since that injury when I found my way to the pool. But now I swimming is a regular part of my routine. It's sort of my
mhm.
like on my non-running days, I like to swim. So I think had I not had that experience, I don't know how long it would have taken me to find my way to
Yeah.
swimming.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think, okay, what are the parallels for the fertility? Like, my yoga instructor, I remember she said, like, I hurt my shoulder one year, but then like, that was the year, and she couldn't do yoga for an entire year, and she loved yoga. But she's like, that is the year I learned how to breathe and connect with my breath. And that has completely informed everything else. And I think one of the hardest parts about fertility care is that time really does matter for many people. If you're 39, 41, 43, like whatever it is, like there really is a time sensitive component that can feel very anxiety provoking, especially when these setbacks happen. And birthdays are very traumatic and we work through them. And, there is that time piece. But I think, sometimes there are, I always say you don't have to like it, but accepting it helps a lot. So if you could accept what is and then say, okay, how can I make the most use of my time? Maybe somebody has a clinic that closes and then they find their way to a new REI who's even like better for them
Hmm.
and their experience is better. So it's not always like the worst case scenario. Sometimes these things do give way to things that are sort of blessings. And I'm not saying that every cloud is a silver lining. I'm not, that's not my
Yeah.
perspective, but I'm saying that we don't always get to choose the things that happen, but we choose how we respond. And
Yeah.
so that mindset piece, I think, really makes a difference as we have these setbacks to say, like, time's going to keep passing. What's in my control? What's out of my control? How can I make the most of this experience and this
Mhm.
time and keep on moving forward, even if it
Yeah.
feels slow?
And how can I be open to it maybe? Because I think sometimes it's very easy to be closed off to what else might be out there, whatever that is. But in the moment, if you can try to just open up a little bit,
Yeah.
and see you never know what might
It's
open.
so true. Like I have a client right now who part of her journey is she's going to have surgery before another transfer. And her surgery, she can't have surgery until July. And so she told me the other day she's going to do this beautiful trip in June for something that she's always wanted to do because she can't do anything else. Like if she was just moving forward with the fertility journey, then maybe that trip would not be available to her. But she's like, well, I have this time. How am I going to make the most of it? This is an opportunity that I can create. and I'm going to go for it. So like things like that. I always say, what else, even if you wouldn't choose this experience, what could you do that might enrich your life? And then sometimes things come up that are unexpected surprises. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true.
um, so yes, a lot of parallels. I also wanted to come back to the mindfulness piece. So, like I said, a lot of people run with headphones. It's amazing though, like how much we miss when we have headphones in or when we're just constantly like, how do you help your athletes when they're not used to that? How do you help them get in touch with mindfulness and sort of show that their experience of life, of thinking about the future, thinking about the past, all those things is so much better when you can incorporate mindfulness in this process?
Yeah, I think it's it depends where someone is starting on that journey. And I've had athletes even tell me that they're sort of like a little bit afraid that the name of my company is Mindful Marathon, and they're like, what does that mean? I don't really know anything
Mm.
about mindfulness. And so I think just starting with a couple of simple things, I always try to get people, if they do run with headphones, to take them off, or if you run on a treadmill, even to just not watch anything while you're on the treadmill, which is tough. I'm not a treadmill person myself, but to just unplug, right, from the things that we're plugged into and plug into yourself and how your body is feeling in that moment. Even if you do it for 5 minutes of the whole run, just to have that experience and take note, like I think it's easier if you're outside to tune into nature. Like you might notice some flowers or trees, like it's spring here in the Northeast. So lots of things are blooming now. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of things open up when you tap into nature and you start to notice all the little animals and things that are in your neighborhood that when I used to run with headphones, I never noticed, like the crazy squirrels and all these birds and owls and woodpeckers and deer. And I don't know. I feel like I talk to the birds in my head a little bit, so that's what I do now. I have names for everybody out on the trail, but yes, if you unplug, you have more of a chance of tapping into nature. And I think besides tapping into nature, when you think about yourself and how you're feeling on the run, I have people do like basically a body scan, like a very basic body scan, just trying to go head to toe and tap into how they're feeling at that pace. So it's I think easiest to do if you're jogging or you're running easy. Like I wouldn't say try this on a speed workout because you have too much that you're already thinking about and trying to hit the pace. But if you're on a nice, easy jog or a walk, just start at your head and kind of go down like how is my face? Is it relaxed? Am I smiling? Where is my attention? Where am I looking? Are my shoulders relaxed or am I hunched up all the way over here? Um, and just kind of go down. How's the belly feeling? How is the heart? How's my heart rate? How's my breathing rate? And you just kind of go head to toe. And that could take, 1 minute or 20 minutes, depending on how fast you can go through it. But I think it's a nice exercise to really figure out like, am I running easy? Like, does this feel easy to the body? Does this feel like a pleasant thing that I'm doing right now? But it's really hard to do that if you're listening to music. So I think that that's the first step, is to try to unplug yourself if possible and just experiment with it and see how you feel. I think that's like the first way to dip your toe in.
I think that's so smart. We do similar things, body scans to feel the feelings because there's a lot that goes on in the landscape that we're just not aware of. I think sometimes we are afraid of what might come up in that silence, which is, I think, why we have the resources to help people work through those things, right?
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
even just yesterday, I was like, I love podcasts, but sometimes time is short. So I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this podcast, and it like kind of ended in the middle of my run, and so there was like this natural break from when I had something in my ears, which I very much enjoyed, right? But I was running outside, 30 degrees in upstate New York, and blue skies. And then I all of a sudden like took out my earbuds and truly listened. And like you said, I heard, flowing water, which is so calming and restorative. Like just there's reasons that there's like fountains and just that sound of water just flowing and like replenishing itself, like all of that just is so calming. And
Yeah.
I saw squirrels and heard woodpeckers, like you said, and like geese and birds. And I even like, I thought I just saw like 3 deer, and I was like, oh, great. I'm going to like take a picture. And it was 6 deer by the side of the road, just like all just doing their deer thing, And so I do find that whenever I feel like I'm trying to force something or on this journey that feels very steep, when I look at nature doing what it does, I do find there's something deeply calming about just sort of tuning in to that moment, the sensory aspect of it. But it's tricky if we're not used to doing that. So I guess by analogy, I'm thinking like, what does a jog or a walk look like for my patients and my clients? Like, probably in between things,
Mhm.
probably during like, okay, you just had this thing, you've gotten all the data. Now you're sort of gearing up to do another thing because that's a relatively quiet time.
Yeah.
Um, it's not the hurry up, it's the wait. And
Yeah.
so if we can learn how to do these things in those calmer times, then we build those muscles literally.
Yep.
And then we can actually use them during the tougher times, like maybe the pregnancy wait,
Yeah.
or maybe waiting to find out about embryo data, or all those things, because we've learned how to access those things during the calm. Then
Hmm.
it's more available for us during the hard times, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the same in running too, like trying to do these on your easier days or in between training cycles when you have either some time off or just a longer period of time where you're doing mostly easy paced runs. In the rest and recovery period is the time to try to hone these skills a little bit so that you take them into the bigger training cycles. So I think yeah, a great parallel.
Yeah, no, that's so amazing. Um, what about mindset shifts? Let's talk about that. So I think the mantras kind of do naturally lead into that. What
Yeah.
what do you find is helpful to your athletes that might also translate into people who are on this long fertility journey?
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes up a lot is just having patience with yourself.
Mhm.
So I've coached a lot of athletes. So over the years, right, I started this about 5 years ago. And at the beginning, I coached a lot of newer runners and like beginner runners. And to see the evolution of all of this, like to run your first 5K and then, okay, now I have pace goals or I have distance goals. Like things open up so much more after that first step, where at the time that felt like a huge thing. Like to get into a consistent running routine and run a first 5K
Sure.
felt like a huge, huge hurdle. And then after that, like, wow, everything opened up. So just knowing that the process can take a long time. So I've been at this 5 years and I have seen people grow over that time. And even for myself, like I ran a 5K, I'm trying to think, it was probably about 5 years after the first 5K that I ran a marathon. So it didn't happen overnight. Like some people do go from couch to 5K to half marathon to full marathon, but a lot of people take a lot of time to get there. So remembering that, yeah, it's not a sprint, if you will, and having the patience to know that this is a journey and we want to have the goal is really right, have a good time on the journey and do the things that you love along the way. So I think just
Yes.
having some grace and realizing that this isn't going to be an overnight thing. Um, I always say like it's not something you can cram for. Like a lot of people will say, "Oh, like, Coach Michelle, I did a thing, like my friends wanted to sign up for this half marathon and I signed up, but I only have, it's 2 months from now and I don't have any time to train." And so I always say, like, you can't cram for it. You really have to give yourself the time
Right.
and do it the right way and prepare so that you don't end up like hating the entire experience or having an injury along the
Mhm.
way. So if you're taking care of yourself and you're giving yourself the appropriate time and team and resources and coaching and all of
Mhm.
those things, you're setting yourself up for success and also like a great time in the sport and in life, really, because that's the goal.
But as I know, I say like this is not the last hard thing that's going to happen. So let's make these tools are going to be translatable to other hard things.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing you say about the mindset is pace of grace, right? So
Yes.
this is a process. This is a journey. This is not just like this is going to happen tomorrow. We prepare ourselves that it is going to be a marathon. And so we get ready to weather the storm. We get our resources, we get our A team, in our minds, we trust it's going to take the time it needs to take, but that there's no rushing the process. And we remind ourselves that we actually deserve joy and we
Yes.
deserve to have fun. Yes, but like training for a marathon is hard work. Like there's sacrifice, there's early mornings, there's dehydration, physiological perturbances, like all the different things. But there's you see the flowers, you see the buds on the trees. It gives us hope that new life is coming. Like there's maybe you make a new friend you might not have. Like I have friends in the fertility world who sorry, like patients and clients who now
Yeah.
become friends with each other
Yep.
because they are shared in this way. They feel like they're not judged. It's a safe space, and then those become lifelong friendships. Like you never knew that was going to happen, but that's a gift along the way of this like overall hard experience. And so it doesn't all have to be hard. There can be lightness, there can be joy, there can be wins, there can be celebrations, and then we move on forward, right?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
which brings me to another question, which is how do you celebrate with your athletes, and how do you recommend that they celebrate once they finally sort of achieve what they set out to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the race is really like in the scheme of time, right? The race is like such a short amount in the scheme of the whole training. And so, my run coach, Coach Billy, shout out to him. He always says, just remember that the race day is really a celebration of your training because we have worked and put in so many hours and weeks and months toward this. And sometimes it can feel like you just, you put so much toward this goal and it's over so quickly, especially if it's a short distance race, it might be over in a half hour or an hour. A marathon, a little longer. But I
Yeah.
think what I try to do with my athletes is have them celebrate the wins along the way. We talked about that, like really focusing mindset on the wins from day to day and week to week. And then also setting maybe some times to celebrate, like leading up to the big goal. So maybe the A goal is the marathon in 6 months from now, but in 3 months from now, we have a half marathon. And we have a fun race with friends that we're doing. So we want to celebrate all of those little goals along the way too, on the way to the A goal. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
really interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
I was thinking about, sometimes even getting to an embryo transfer cycle is a win in of itself because there've been so many delays and so many like we're gonna do surgery, we're gonna do suppression, we're gonna generate more embryos, and like getting to even though we don't know what the outcome of that cycle is gonna be yet, like
yep,
just celebrating I got to this point, like I have worked so hard to even have the opportunity to have an embryo transfer, so we're going to celebrate that. Like I think that you're right. I think it really helps to have these surrogate celebrations along the way. Somebody has a good cycle and they generate a lot of good embryos. That's fantastic. We need to honor that. So yeah,
mhm,
it's not just about like the final destination. And
yeah,
people who are successful, they're like, okay, so I got a positive pregnancy test and then my beta rose and then I had my ultrasound and all of a sudden I was like a regular OB patient. Like, and then I started freaking out about what it was going to be like to be a parent. That train just really took off. And I'm like, I
yeah.
know, because good news begets more anxieties and fears. And then we got to use those tools to help. So I think you're right. Really like sort of looking at the milestones along the process and honoring each of those and the growth that happens along the way and
Yeah.
keeping a record of those things.
I think I'm definitely I was guilty of this, especially early on in my own running journey, where I would run a race, for example, and yeah, like get a personal record and celebrate that, but only for like a few hours, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, I really want to beat that time, and I'm already looking at races 3 months from now to sign up for. And I was always a person who had races on the calendar. And I don't think I fully like celebrated all of the progress up until that point. And so for
Interesting.
me, sometimes like not having a race on the calendar is actually the win and something to celebrate because I'm running because I love to run and not just attached to a time goal. So remembering when there's a big milestone or a small milestone, really sit with that and celebrate however it is feels right for you, but give yourself the time to celebrate that before you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's super amazing. And I think there's so many sort of pearls of wisdom in our conversation. I can't wait to re-listen because I just think, you're right, like fertility journey, marathon, but then also life. Like if we apply what we've talked about today to the broader situations, the challenges, like come back to that mindfulness, come back to all the things we talked about. I just think it's going to help us just live fuller, richer, more connected lives and appreciate the beauty along the way. So I am so encouraged by this conversation. I think that, the listeners are going to hear a lot in your experience, helping these athletes, you know, basically train and get to the race day because there's so many parallels. I think it's just amazing. And I mean, medicine, if you think about medicine, I always say, okay, what did you tell yourself right before you were, applying to medical school? Like, you had some belief in yourself that it was going to work, even though it was against the odds. Right. And so then so like, training is another marathon too. So I think if we think about sometimes when I'm thinking about, okay, what data do I have that I have what it takes to do this thing? I look at other experiences where I've, been persistent or had resilience or endurance and all those things. I'm like, okay, well, I handled that hard thing. Like I'm going to, just translate this into this next thing that maybe I've not done yet. So I think all these things are translatable. And, it's just a beautiful thing. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for your wisdom today. I've learned a lot and I can't wait to hear the feedback because I know that the listeners are going to learn a lot too. So,
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, at first when we had talked about doing some collaboration, I was like, I'm not sure how this is all related. And then now we really, yeah, after several conversations, there are many, many, many parallels.
so
So
many.
thank you.
Yeah. So tell me, so where can my listeners find you if they want to like listen to your content or understand more about maybe they're even doing some running themselves and like, I don't know, like I said to you, I'm like the gear, the stuff, like where can people find you to learn more?
Yeah, probably the best place is the website that has all the links for everything. It's mindful, a little hyphen, marathon.com. And if you're already listening to the podcast and you're a podcast person, you can find the Mindful Marathon podcast on all the major platforms that
That's
you
right.
usually use.
And you also said you have something on your website about intuition, which I know we didn't call it specifically, but I want to read that too. So can you point us to that resource too? Because I think there's so much of this fertility journey where we have to really tune into our intuition. And you do that with your athletes. So what is that and where can we find that?
Yeah, there are several blog posts that have some mindfulness techniques. There's one on the body scan specifically, and there's one on running by feel, or I think it's called intuitive pacing. But on the website, there's at the top, if you click the blog and scroll down, you'll see it there. It's a few entries down. But yeah, lots of reading material if you want to read
Yeah.
that. If you're up at night and struggling to sleep, go to the body scan.
Yay. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Dr. Michelle. I am just so, so thrilled for our friendship, our collaboration, and I can't wait for all the conversations that are yet to happen.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for listening.
Absolutely. Until the next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Love and Science podcast. I'm so glad you joined us today. If you found this conversation valuable, if you could please rate, review, and share this podcast with your trusted people, it would mean so much to me. If you want more tools to help you navigate the fertility journey, please book a discovery call with me today. The link is in the show notes. Please do not let infertility have the final word. I'm here to take the burden from you so that you can achieve your goal of building your family. In gratitude, this is Dr. Erica Bove. I'm rooting for you always.